The reason I'd work in those environments and all the other things is because I feel like an imposter. So I work as hard as I can to prove to myself that I'm somewhat worthy of being there. It's good. So, and so it's not false, it's not fake, it's a real intention to do the best I can. But if I'm standing around doing nothing, I'm like, the voice in my head's like, what the f*** are you doing here? So I just carry on working. It's much easier than having a conversation with myself.
Hey, how's it going? You are here for Heavy Art Talk. As usual, it's your host, Lee. Today, I am very excited. I am talking with Thomas Hooper, who is an artist of many disciplines. He's been tattooing for 25 years. He's worked with some bands, including Neurosis, Converge, Botch, Doomriders, Cave In, Old Man Gloom, Tombs, and so on. But without further ado, Thomas, what's happening, man?
How you doing?
Doing good. And thank you for staying up late for me. You in UK 5 hours ahead. Appreciate it.
Yeah, well, this is actually like my it's 10:30, so this is actually when I start my second job, I'd say. So normally I sit down at my desk and start drawing, either for tattoos or for artwork or whatever, and I'll try and stay up till about 1 or 1:30. So
what time do you get up usually?
6:37.
Oh my God, man.
And then because I tattoo 5 or 6 days a week for around 7 hours. And then I have a family and we do all that stuff. So
that's crazy, man. You truly have quite the work ethic, I can already tell.
Squeezing as much time in as possible, or squeezing as much time out as possible at every moment. But yeah.
Well, I appreciate you carving out some time to, reflect on some of the things that you've learned over the years, man.
It's my pleasure.
Just kind of kicking it off. What have you been listening to lately?
Oh, I thought I'd just go with the things that have been on heavy rotation. Is lately and for most of the year is a band called Lankan, and they're like an Irish kind of heavy folk band, but there's no distortion or guitars or anything in them. I saw them play live earlier in the year, and one of their songs called Go Dig My Grave is the only other band to come close to seeing Neurosis live to give me that same goosebumps, the same like, for me, that's what Neurosis gives me live every time. Then they have an offshoot, a band called Oxen, Rady Pete sings in. That I listen to a lot of and have been this week. And then Ian has another group called, it's like a side project called One Leg, One Eye, and that I've been listening to. It's more of like a noisy, it's not ambient, it's like I don't know, I just recommend checking it out. It's very interesting and strange. And then I've been listening to the new album by a band called You Do Right. They're like from Canada. They're like a heavy rock prog band that just tick my boxes with a lot of, I don't know, just production and the whole thing's like pretty fantastic. That album, what's the name of that record? I was listening to it on the way here just a minute ago. That is called From the Heights of Our Pasture Land. I've been enjoying that a lot. The Coalesce live at Maida Vale, I don't know, they were always one of my favorites, I guess. And so that has been on. And then the last 2 days I've been listening to Cave In's Jupiter because a friend just informed me that it turns 25 next year, which I think's fucking crazy. So
yeah.
So that's been a lot of what I've been listening to lately. I mean, I actually listen to quite a wide range of things at the shop. We listen to all sorts of music. So, but I'm just going to throw those into the mix. Actually, let me add one thing. I've been listening to this gentleman called Greet, who was the drummer in a black metal band called Doomriders, who I listened to a lot, but he played at my shop last Friday. So we had him play live in the shop. Yeah, it's fucking phenomenal. He's a drummer in a black metal band that was like fucking just super right on and rad, pretty political and really compassionate in their lyrics. They're from Northern England, and they disbanded like before I even discovered them, actually. And then I got really into them, and then he started this other thing called Greet, which is him just singing and playing harmonium.
Nice.
So completely
different. I have that first Dawn Raid album. It's good.
Yeah, the most recent one, I discovered it on Ian from Lankham has a podcast called Fire Draws Near, and he played one of their songs on this folk podcast because they have a lot of folk songs in there, and there's an a cappella song where they just all sing with no instruments. And it's pretty amazing. It's like it almost feels like a working class protest song. But yeah. So that's what I've been listening to. What have you been listening to?
I've been listening to the new Opeth album a lot. I mean, that was a big band for me growing up, and I'm a big prog rock fan as well as metal, so it's kind of a nice marriage of the two. So I really dig the new Opeth album, and like a lot of other metalheads, the new Blood Incantation is very good.
I deliberately didn't mention that because everyone mentions it.
Yeah,
it's just so good. I mean, if you get Tangerine Dream to play on your record, you've won.
Yeah, totally. And they have I saw them live and they performed the whole album. They have the keyboardist from Halas joining them on stage, and man, it was a very impressive performance. Probably one of the best I've seen this year. Them and a band out of Philadelphia called Horrendous. Those are the two shows that have just like really knocked my socks off.
Oh, amazing.
But yeah, man. When it comes to like your musical journey, then when you were like a teenager, what kind of stuff were you getting into at the time?
What was I getting into? So I was trying to get, my friends were into metal and I was trying to get into it, and I was just like Iron Maiden and Metallica. I was like, I don't get this. And then I grew up riding BMX and was sponsored for a while and stuff like that, and in videos and traveled with it a bit. But we'd get the videos, the VHS tapes of and there'd be like the pro stuff that was like the glossy kind of shiny chrome bike stuff, and then you had the rider-owned companies, and that's where I gravitated towards. And those videos were like skate videos, and so I got into the music off them. And so there was like just all the classics, Zeppelin and Rolling Stones and that. But then there was little things that stood out. That was like early Green Day. This is even before that Dookie came out. And so I started getting into punk, and I was like, "What is this?" And I just pulled on the thread, and I landed through that journey on Propaganda of all things, because it was the most true with me for like the pop punk, and then kind of went on a tangent with like Crass and Subhumans, but I wanted more. And so then I sort of delved in, and I just was never finding it. I discovered Minor Threat and Fugazi, and I was into that, but I wanted more still. And I went on a BMX trip when I hadn't started tattooing. I was 18, and I drove for 8 hours with. And so this is interlinked with some other topics that we'll get to. But so we drove I was in America, and we drove from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania to Pittsburgh, which was maybe 8 hours in a Oldsmobile 88. And I know some of the guys I went with still, two of them quite well still, and we only had 2 CDs, which were theirs, which was this guy Chris Stoffer, who was a pro that I looked up to. We had Converge, Petitioning the Empty Sky, and this band from Canada called New Day Rising. It was like an early discography of theirs. And I've discovered a lot of other music via Chris as well. Like he had a Times of Grace poster on his wall and all this other stuff. But so we listened to that, and the first pass on Converge, The Saddest Day, I was like, what the fuck is this? And then by the third pass, I was like, oh, I fucking like this. And then I was like, oh, I've got to go buy this. And then I bought that, and then I was in and I bought a few other things on CD. And then the following year, I was back in Pennsylvania because I couldn't get anything like that in the UK, or at least I didn't know where to. Could go to London, but they only sold punk and maybe some hardcore, and I didn't want any of that, and I didn't like any of the stuff that was macho or kind of meatheadish, which is why I wasn't into a lot of metal. And there was a record store. I went back to the same town to see friends in Allentown that's closed this year, called Double Decker, and they had a Converge and Coalesce split 7-inch, and I was like, oh, there's a Converge 7-inch. I bought it, and it was like, what's this band Coalesce? And then the rack that it was with, there was like lots of other art that was similar, and then like the little stickers with the little notes that said things like blah 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 blah. And so I bought like 27 inches, and in that stack was Cave In, Locust, like all of those bands from that, but the standouts.
Yeah.
And there was a Botch one. I think there was, and it kind of led me into what I've always referred to as like the main bands for me growing up from that point and to this day and their offshoots were Converge, Cave In, Botch, Coalesce, and the first Dillinger record.
Yeah.
And seeing all those bands live back then as well was phenomenal and stuff like that. So that was my route. And then obviously you discover the record labels, the internet happened, and it's a myriad of things, but that was my kind of thing. And we used to have, the town I'm in now, there was a record store here, and he would mail order Hydra Head stuff over, and he'd literally call me and be like, we've got more Hydra Head stuff in, and I'd just go there and buy it without listening to it, and I'd get it back. I still have the first Sunrobe, the first Sun O demo CD that they did in the little clip plastic kind of sleeve thing. Man. I got that from him, like all sorts of shit. So that was the way I went. And then because I grew up listening to this weird shit that didn't really work or make sense a lot of the time, I'd end up wanting to listen to stuff that, doesn't make sense. So like the most recent Sumac record makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah, man. Yeah. That's awesome too, because like your art style and the bands you've worked with, a lot of them fall in that camp. So sometimes when I talk with artists, the stuff that they really, really love and they're passionate about in terms of their music taste isn't necessarily what they're creating for. But with you, it seems like a pretty good marriage. Yeah, I'm very, very lucky.
Lucky, very privileged. Lucky. I don't know, not lucky, but I've been in the right place at the right time and been able to have the effort I put into my work come back. And so I was thinking today about this interview and the story of these things. And so when I lived in London tattooing, I got a job at a really good shop, and I met a lot of people there. And one of them was a man called Tony Sylvester, who became a really good friend. And he worked for Southern Records, not Southern Lord, but this other. They distributed loads of smaller labels in the UK, like Hydra Head and stuff like that. And he did press for all of the bands, Neurosis, or everything in that sphere, ISIS, everything. And so I used to get to meet people because I was his friend and stuff like that. And then I met Converge at one of their shows, and Tony was like, "Oh, do you want to get tattooed? Thomas will tattoo you." And I was like, "Will I? Okay." And then back in 2003, I tattooed Jake and Nate after one of their shows. And then I saw them play the following year, and Nate was like, "Oh, email me, blah, 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 and we'll put you on the list." And I was like, "Okay." And I did, and went and said hi, and, that happened. Only, like, I'd see them once a year for half an hour, and then blah, blah, blah. And then we became friends. And then I can't remember what year. I actually texted Jake earlier today, and he hasn't delivered. No. So I don't know when the year was. Might have been 2004, maybe 2005 or 6. But he asked me out of the blue to do a Converge poster for a European tour. And I was like, I'd never done a poster. I don't really paint. I've painted a bit, but not like the paintings I see the people do that And I was like, but I just said yes anyway. And I did a painting. It's a skull with a crow. It's very, very me, but very naive and early me. Kind of, I didn't know what to reference. I went to art school and all this stuff, but not for illustration. I painted. My passion's abstract art, and so here I am trying to fit into this mold of being like the art that I normally see these bands use. Which I don't know. It doesn't matter whether that's a good idea or a bad idea. But anyway, I did it. They used it. Jake has the original to this day, and then from there I did some more bits, and then Nate asked me to do the Doomriders record, and from there I got a lot. At the same time, I did the Tunes record, but Nate getting me to do the Doomriders record kind of just led me into all the world of those people and allowed me to make a lot of art for bands. So I'm very, very grateful for their friendship and their trust and what they've kind of let me do for them. Does that make sense?
So you just mentioned there that when you had that opportunity to do the Converge poster, that was like a kind of a new era of starting painting and stuff. So what were you doing previously art wise? Was it just tattooing and then you found painting? But you also mentioned that you're interested in abstract art. So I was just kind of curious, how that worked.
So I'll wind back. So I went to art school, to art college. I studied a bunch of stuff, actually. I studied film, photography, media, magazine, design, graphic design, all at low-level college, and then even engineering. And then I did art and lots of different things with that. And I was more interested in printmaking and abstract art and painting, but not in a illustrative sense at all. My end of year show was two giant black paintings. They were like 1.5 meters square. I painted the canvas in a concrete solution that I made up myself with concrete and gesso, and then painted them black and stuck things and kind of submerged things in black paint and kind of painted some other stuff over them and used gloss and matte. And I don't know, they were very textural. One of my favorite artists is a German artist called Anselm Kiefer. So I was very inspired by that. And then a Spanish one called Tapies. Very abstract kind of gestural stuff. So I was painting a lot, but it was like that. And then when I started tattooing, I just started drawing tattoo art and trying to figure out how to draw all the staples within tattooing, whether it's a rose or a swallow, the ornamental black work stuff, Japanese stuff, just trying to learn it all. And so that I stopped doing any art as such and started just doing that type of design stuff. So, and that's kind of leads into and now the two, they've crossed back and forth in different times, and now they've really kind of chaotically crossed together in an interesting way.
Yeah. Because I could see both influences, especially the printmaking background, all the posters that you've done that we'll show a little later. They all have such cool texture and color combinations, and it's the more you look at it, the more you just admire the tiny little details of how it was made. Because your art approach is very different than mine, so sometimes I have to get out of my own head and be just look at what's right in front of me and be wow, there's something very different in the entire approach here. So I was admiring a lot today putting together the slide deck, especially the stuff you're doing lately.
Lately I've found myself in a place of not caring so much what I think about what I'm doing, and in a negative aspect. And what I'm searching for is trying to make images that give me the same feeling that I get when I listen to music, that gives me a really kind of a good punch in the stomach. If I can make a picture that does that, and I don't have the illustration skills to make that happen with the way something's drawn, the way the easiest. Because I was listening to your podcast with Richie, the interview with Richie this morning, he can do that. There's some of his posters where I'm like, fuck, dude, you got it, like you really smashed it there, and some of them are just really good, beautiful illustrations. And I don't mean that as a negative thing, but there's a couple where it's like, fuck, I've been hassling him to sell me the original to the Cave-In cover. And he's like,
he was
dude,
saying that,
it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good at all. I was like, I don't care. I want it. I'm greedy. I want the original. Let me have it. He's like, he's like, I had to layer it, and he like whatever he richifies things, and but yeah, so he keeps making excuses. But yeah, I'm trying to get that off him.
When did you first meet him? Like, you guys been friends for like over 10 years?
So I believe we met pre either of us making band artwork. I was tattooing. I may have been in a band and played with him.
Okay.
I think my band opened up for his, but that's a different topic. But so I did meet him prior to that. That's like both of us, like totally different lifetimes ago. But I met him properly. I don't really know. I think we started talking on the internet because we have mutual friends within tattooing and in music. I don't know if the first time I properly met him was at Roadburn in 2017. I feel like it might have been. I might have met him at a show prior to that, but I think it might have been Roadburn.
You mentioned you were the first person to set up and to close up shop at Roadburn. That kind of stuck with me, like the work ethic aspect of, I mean, it's obviously like making art, like the work ethic involved in that, but even just like, I don't know, being available at a show, like for, talking with people and selling work and stuff. I don't know. It just, sometimes I think when it comes to creating art, like there's the glorified romantic version of it, but then there's also just the nuts and bolts of the amount of time and energy you put into it. It eventually comes back to you. So I don't know if that's a question, but just like work ethic and hard work and time put into something has been kind of sticking with me lately.
Yeah, so I guess there's two parts to that. So work ethic and time and stuff, like, I fucking love what I do. It's a massive privilege to make pictures that people like to look at, let alone wear permanently for the rest of their life. And so I'll just give it everything, because and it's also, it's making art, especially like tattooing, because there's something about the pressure of tattooing of like, I've got a time limit. The person's in pain. I'm trying to get it done at a certain amount of time because of their budget, because I don't want them to have to spend a lot of money because, I don't want to drag things out. It's got to be like this. And so there's a lot of hyper intense focus, which makes all your bullshit disappear, So it's like a safe space from anxiety, because you can be anxious before, but in it, you can't be, because if you are, it's fucked. So, I've taught myself, and so it's very easy for me to work a 12-hour day doing that, because in those I'll feel like shit afterwards, but in those 12 hours, aside from feeling tired or my back hurting, it's, everything, the brain is actually really good, and then I said there was two parts to that, didn't I? So, and then the second part to that is
work ethic and time.
So like the Roadburn thing that Richie mentions in that one. So Jake and I, we overprescribed ourselves. He was playing. He also, like, let's just hang on here as well. He's talking about the work ethic. All I had to do was that, and I take on the reins of a logistical stuff to take off for Jake, because he's got to play 2 shows.
Right.
And there was 1 year where he had to play 2 shows. What did he do? I think Converge played 2 shows. I can't remember. I know Where Your Wounds was playing, and he sung some songs for fucking zozobra because Caleb had passed away the year before. So I'm like taking care. So he's actually working way harder than me, but but for me, the reason I'd work in those environments and all the other things is because I feel like a fucking imposter. So I work as hard as I can to prove to myself that I'm somewhat worthy of being there. It's good. Yeah. So, and so it's not false, it's not fake, it's a real intention to do the best I can. But if I'm standing around doing nothing, I'm like, the voice in my head's like, the fuck are you doing here? So I just carry on working. It's much easier than having a conversation with myself.
I feel you there, man. Do you think that's related somewhat to your current modus operandi of like just creating the art that is purely joyful and not trying to dissect it too much? And what you were talking about earlier? Do you think it's like a reaction to that? Like you've kind of broken a boundary of some sort?
Yeah, it's a reaction to that. Maybe a reaction to the world around me. Being conscious of what I'm putting into the world. Like the big colourful paintings that I make. In part, it's because I stand in front of them and, I want to paint something that makes me feel kind of good when I stand in front of it, because otherwise, you're absorbing everything around you. And so, of course, I'm going to be absorbing something I'm making. So I was like, well, I'm going to make things that just make me feel really good. And even though I don't feel like I should make this big colourful stuff because that's not me, because I make the dark, heavy tattoos and all of this. I was like, oh, fuck it. And then other people enjoyed them, and I liked that, what it kind of, not other people's response, but what it seemed to kind of give to other people at times. I just like putting an effort of what I put into the world, trying to add something nice or positive or good if I can. I still draw or tattoo skulls at least once every day, so that's fine.
Do the people who come for like tattoo work nowadays, are they pretty much all looking for like very large scale work? Are you still doing some kind of like smaller, like flash related stuff as well?
No, I do small flash related stuff. I've actually got my drawing tables right here at work, and I put a few things on here. But I opened my shop over the weekend, and I don't know how.
This is really fresh in terms of the shop.
This is really fresh. Yeah. So the shop, we had our grand opening over the weekend, which is why I wasn't that prepped earlier. And so I drew a sheet of flash for it. I don't know if you can see, of things that I thought no one would actually want to get tattooed. But actually I did. There's right here is a piece of driftwood, and I tattooed it on someone, and they were very, very happy. And so I draw a flash that's like strange little things that make me smile. There's stones from the beach that I found, and I draw like that. Like half of that flash I actually drew it on an airplane last time I flew to New York. I've discovered these fountain pens that Japanese manga artists use, and so I can travel with ink. And so I'm just sitting there on a plane with a piece of Bristol board, cross hatching away. Bit of turbulence.
Very nice.
I'll fix that later.
Got to roll with it a bit.
Yeah.
Are they do you know what brand those are? It sounds interesting. I have a lot of the like Pentel brushes. I love these Japanese pieces.
Yeah, I like them. I like them a lot. They're platinum desk pens. They're not expensive either. I'm happy to. I'll figure them out and email you the link. So if you want to put it in the info, because I like sharing that stuff.
Yeah, I love testing stuff like that.
Yeah, but they're super cool, and it's nice to just, and they're designed. They have a gold-plated nib, and so because I'm really bad, because I work really late, so quite often I'll draw and and then look at what I've done and be quite happy, because it's part of the reason I draw with pen and ink, because it was so difficult for so long. Now when I do it, I'm like, look what I did. I was like, look what I did. I did my homework, and and then quite often I'm just really happy and really tired, and then I just go to bed. And in the morning I wake up and I'm like, oh, so you didn't even clean your brushes or your pens or anything, and you just left them out on the desk to dry. Good job. So, you know, so, so I discovered these because I can put the lid on them, not use them for 2 months, pull them off, use them a couple of times, give them a shake, and off they go. And I found cartridges that they're refillable cartridges, so I can use any ink in them. And I found a waterproof ink and all sorts. So yeah, I'll share it all with you.
Nice. Yeah, that sounds way up my alley, because I've done mostly stuff with like brush, but I haven't experimented a lot with nibs. This would be a nice way to ease into it, I think. So very cool.
Yeah, it's still nib. I was for a while. I was like, oh, it's cheating. I was like, how is not? But just because I'm not going over to the other side of the work area to dip my pen in an inkwell and try not to drip it on my drawing, hey, how is that not cheating? It's still ink, and I'm using the same ink.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So these, and they do super fine ones as well, and there's some thick ones and everything. So it's great.
Very cool. So prior to art school, then, like when you were growing up, I guess what kind of compelled you to go that route? Because you were like doing BMX as well. Like, it seems like maybe there was like a fork in the road at some point.
Well, the fork in the road with BMX I've only just lately come to understand what it really was, but I was riding at a fairly okay level, doing kind of pretty big, silly stuff in a way. And I have a bit of anxiety, and so I'd started getting anxious about doing stuff, and was actually hurting myself because I would halfway through jumping a jump and turning around midair, halfway through I'd be like, no, you can't do this, and I'd jump off, and this was a recurring theme. And I also didn't want to try and chase this goal of being like some sort of athlete or something, and being in the spotlight actually makes me feel pretty awful, even though I continue to seem to want to chase it, but another different subject. So, and I was very inspired by, there was at the time, a lot of riders that I was friends with that were starting their own bike companies. They started their own clothing companies, all in this little subgenre of things. And then I met, and it was just I was like, so you can just make your own thing. You can draw your own T-shirt and have it printed and sell it. And then I discovered tattooing, and I was like, oh, can I put these two together? And so I wanted to start a bike company, so I went and studied engineering. I didn't enjoy that kind of all the maths and that aspect of it, although I liked the technical drawing. But then I wanted to be a photographer. There's a mention of it. One of my main inspirations is a man called Sandy Carson, who's a photographer and a BMXer, and now he's a musician, and I just did his album cover. He's been a friend for, I guess he's been a friend for, I've met him 31 years ago. So, but he's from Scotland originally and lives in Austin, Texas now. But so I studied photography and I studied film, and actually wanted to be a cinematographer and all this other stuff. And I just kept getting drawn into making pictures. And then when I discovered tattooing, it was like, you can make a picture, and there's, this is, as being an artist that makes art for bands, I come from quite a privileged position, because I don't need to worry about getting a certain amount of work to live, because I go to work in the day and make a drawing and someone pays me that moment. I don't have to then email the record label and be like, hey dude, it's been 3 months, can you pay me? This thing's come out already.
Yeah.
Which I've had to do and will do, because it all adds up. But as soon as I discovered tattooing, whereas you do a drawing, someone says, yeah, I like it. You put it on them, and then they're like, this is fucking awesome, high five. And then they give you some money, and you're like, okay. Well, I don't want to inspire too many people to want to become tattooers, but it's been really fortuitous just to be able to do that. There's nothing else like it, because now there's also a whole human connection aspect of like,
Right.
like the conversation we're having this evening, like 2-3 hours. I get 2 of them a day, or one really long one 5 days a week with one of my customers, and my customers are all really awesome. And I've seen some of them for like, they've been coming, like I've got a couple of them that they've been seeing me consistently for like 10 years. And then some people that, I've seen on and off for the whole 25, but, I've seen some of them for like twice, 3 times a year for 10 years, which is crazy to think of, really. Yeah.
Pretty much, man. What did your apprenticeship look like then? Like 25 years ago? Or was there
really
any?
have one.
No, just dived right into it?
Not really. So the man that taught me to tattoo was called Jim McCart. He now works with me at my shop, and he's like a brother to me. He's, even though he's like 20 something years older than me. So I got tattooed by him. We got on well, and there was a connection, and I started helping out cleaning at the shop and that, and I didn't really know why. And then on one of my BMX trips with a friend of mine, Steve Crandall, I swapped some tattoo equipment for a mini display, and I brought it back, and he found out, and I thought I was going to, I don't know, get in trouble for having done that without asking him first. But he was into it. He helped me set it all up. I tattooed myself. And then it didn't really work for me to work at his shop because he had people there already. And so I just, helped out and cleaned there for a bit. And then I went to art school and tattooed out my house. So, I worked in tattoo shops long enough to understand all the hygiene and kind of do that apprentice side of it. But I just started working out of my house in a very clean, ethical manner. And then put myself through university tattooing, and then got a job at a shop in my last year of university. So, because I have a bachelor's in drawing as well. So
okay, nice, man. Yeah, I mean, everyone has a different journey with that, and 25 years ago, it's also different than how it would be now. There's been so many different iterations.
Now you can just go on Amazon. Probably spend like £100 tops, and if you are competent at drawing and have a brain on you, you'll be able to do it in a few days. I mean, whether you'll really be able to do it is a different thing. But yeah.
So. But once again, you're not encouraging people to do that necessarily.
No. I mean, but I'm not discouraging either. Do what you want. It's the world's a different place now.
In terms of your shop, then I guess I don't know if I'd say like what's kind of your vision for it? Like, how do you want it to feel when people come in, or like what's the atmosphere you're looking for?
Welcoming, friendly, kind, creative. I want it to feel like a place where you can get any kind of tattoo, and just like a really, I mean, I don't know. In some ways it feels quite unique, and in other ways it doesn't feel that unique to some of the other places I've worked in that have inspired me to do a shop like this. And it's more just like, I called my shop Nowhere because I just couldn't think of a name. And I liked how obtuse it was and thought it was really smart, but there's like 4 other shops with the same name. So, and whenever I meet anyone from mostly Norway, they think it's called Now Here, and I'm like, there's no space between the words. So we get to have a nice argument about what my shop's actually called. But there's my friend has the best way to represent it, or my aim for it. My friend named his shop in that same kind of thing. It is because it's quite a wide ranging thing, because everyone's different. So you can't make it fit one type of person or one type of tattooing. So everyone's welcome, but everyone is such a wide sphere of things. So it's like finding the fit for everyone is, that's a hard task. But My friend Seth Wood opened a shop in Oakland, and it's called Best Day Ever, because that's really, if when you're getting tattooed, it should be the best fucking day ever. Because then when
Yeah.
you look down at that tattoo, you're like, that was the fucking best day ever. You're not even looking at the art. It doesn't matter. You're like, that was fucking rad. That month at work was shit. I took that day off. I got a fucking cool tattoo. That's kind of, and I think historically in the Western world, that's kind of what it was. If you're, if you're going back to sailors and on ships, in the Navy, they would dock in a port, having been at sea for fucking God knows how long, 6 months, and they're on land and they go get tattooed. That's fucking amazing, And so you're trying to do that, but in our sphere of things. And so I want people to come in here and be like, oh yeah, this was I needed this day, even though it was very, very expensive and painful. But so
Yeah, but once it's done though, it's like this giant feeling of relief, like that is a good feeling. Like once the session's done.
Yeah, one of my friends explained it as their tattoos giving them fortitude, and so that's kind of that's a good aspiration to have, to give other people, I think. So I don't really know how to do it. I just managed to do it at times. So.
Yeah. All right. So kicking it off, thinking Neurosis, and I have, well, you'll explain, but I think some of the stuff is like sketches that kind of lead into it as well. But tell me a little bit about this project and the process.
So the band reached out to me. So I opened my email, and I've got an email from Steve Von Till about doing some artwork for Neurosis and him being a fan of my work. And I'm like, what the fuck? I'd met him a couple of times, but Steve's a very, very funny man and quite jovial and silly. And because you're like, you're kind of expecting to meet Neurosis Steve, and who's quite serious, has a deep voice, and sings about doorways and blood, and and stuff like this, and so I got an email saying, asking me to do album art, and I was like, oh, what the fuck? Okay, and I was just like, I don't know, and so I just responded with like, well, I'm a fucking massive fan, so I don't really know what to say or where to start, but let's figure out, how to make the best out of this. And then we had lots of conversations, and it was actually really nice. It was like the start of a very, what's become a very meaningful friendship with Steve. But the album, so basically, they all, as a group, they kind of struggle to figure out what visually represents what they do, because they've had a lot of stuff and cycled through a lot of things, and they didn't want to repeat themselves and all these other things. And I was like, and I wasn't given anything. I wasn't given demos. I wasn't given any lyrics. I wasn't given any, any hints. And I was like, okay, right. And so I listened to a bunch of older Neurosis and started thinking about it and thinking about what things meant to me. And I made a private blog. This is back when we had blogs. I mean, I still have one, but I made a private WordPress page, and I invited all the members to be the only ones that could view it. And I just made sketches and abstract things. Like in the bottom right now, there's like a red sphere with rays coming out from behind and inside it, with a black kind of curve running through it, and some gold. And I'd make lots of very quick things and try and make something every day or two. And I'd just throw it, and then I'd scan it and put it up there. And I just waited and then we'd have a phone call I'd have a phone call with Steve every, 2-3 weeks. And then one day he was like, okay, yeah, this is this is like, this is looking like the ones you just switched to. They were like, okay, this is feeling like you're on the right path here, and I was like, okay. And so I just explored that, and we needed, like, they liked the ghostly tree thing, but we needed a motif to go on the cover, and I wanted something. And they're not really a metal band. Everyone thinks of them a metal band, but they're not. Really, they're just a rock band, and it's turned up a bit. There's all this, what they're playing. Maybe like Through Silver and Blood could be called metal, but really it's noise rock with shouting.
It's like tension and release. That's how I always think about it.
Yeah,
it's dynamic.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, they did their own genre, their own thing. So trying to make art for someone that's done that, it was fucking scary as fuck. So I just went at it with intention. And I think because I crafted a way to, like, share with them the process privately and kind of let them kind of be like, okay, yeah, so we want a red sphere. We like the ghostly tree. We love the textures, that the different things, And it was a really big deal for me, this piece. So I did everything. I did all the layout. I did all the writing by hand as well. I did all the lyrics, all the, like, the Neurosis and the Fires Within Fires is painted on the cover. I wanted to, like, I put my best effort into it, as it were. And
so you didn't patch that on after. You're saying the painting literally is that. That's a lot of pressure, man.
It's a lot of pressure. I did 3 big paintings for it that were basically all designed so they worked with. They had extra areas for bleed, the whole thing, but they worked as kind of like pieces of fine art as well. And so that's how it came about. And I wanted, so those prints there, that's so those are prints that you can buy on Death Wish. The painting on the right is the front and back cover. Now, on the original, there was the Neurosis painted off to the above the front cover, like it is on the record. But for the print, I digitally removed it because I wanted to sell the print as a piece of art, so it didn't necessarily have to be to the band, and I didn't like using the band's net logo on my art to help sell the prints either. So I wanted it to be a standalone thing. And then the painting on the left is a painting exactly as you see him holding it there, but it's the 4 vinyl stickers, and the printed that pyramid with the sun thing is one side of the lyric sheet.
That's awesome that those are the like the vinyl, like, stickers, like, on the actual thing.
Yes.
So much attention to detail.
But then I put them on a thing because I wanted there to be these original paintings that were there. Because I was like, I mean, unfortunately, I was right, but at the time I was like, I might never get to do this again, And so, and I did, and as we know, the band are no more. So I didn't, But so
you put everything into it, man.
Yeah, and I was really pleased with it. And it's massive honourable mention that is connected to this kind of posthumously is my good friend Jay Weinberg, who's I met before he joined Slipknot, and we've been friends ever since. The year I painted and did these, when it came out earlier in the year, I think, or maybe the end of the year before, but I hung on to the originals and framed them, kept them for a while. But I fractured my spine in 2018 and couldn't work for a couple of months, and then had a couple more months of rehab and a bunch of medical bills. I lived in Texas at the time, and I sold the originals to Jay because I needed money, and he purchased them knowing that I needed money. So,
that's really generous.
He helped me out in a really difficult spot, and I mean, he has the originals. He has all 3. There's 3 originals actually. I don't know. The third one is for the gatefold, and it has a heart on it.
Yeah, I think I forgot to put that in there, but I did see it, and I can put it in post here.
Yeah, or you don't need to necessarily, but yeah. So that, and Jay actually has like, God, I don't know. He has like, I think both of his ribs are Neurosis themed tattoos by me.
Oh wow. When
Yeah,
did you meet him then?
I met him at an art exhibition I had in New York when I lived there, right before I moved, probably in 2011. I think Jay might not have even been 16, and one of his parents had to bring him. And Nate called me up from Nate from Converge called me up and was like, "Hey, my buddy Jay's going to come to your art opening. He's like the nicest dude ever. Please make sure you give him a moment to say hi to him because he's like super young and like really loves what you do." I was like, "Okay, yeah, for sure." And so I have a picture of me and Jay somewhere on my phone from that, where Jay's like, I don't know, 15 or 16 or something.
What did you know?
So,
He was Max Weinberg's son at the time.
no, I had no idea. So, and
That's
now,
funny, man.
we're really good friends. And now, so in 1 month, Jay's going to do a drum clinic here at my shop and actually play in the back of the shop right there.
Really?
And yeah, because what I'm trying to do with the shop is just bring different people in. I mean, it's fun for me, but bring different people into the shop via seeing different events. And so we're going to have a couple of they're like clinic performance things that he does. And so, yeah,
That's awesome, man. I'm a big fan of his playing. I also, I grew up on Slipknot, and I have no bones about it. That was like big band to get me into metal music, and I feel like he added a lot of good energy to Slipknot during his tenure, and I always loved watching him
yeah, for
play.
sure.
So that's awesome,
Yeah,
dude. I didn't know
and
that.
I think he's on a great trajectory now. Like, because because if he joined another metal band, it would have been kind of weird. But now he's in, he's doing something different. You can see his face, and I'm sure he'll do something metal again. But this is like a nice interim, and so I'm really happy for him.
So Doomriders.
Yeah, that was another give it my all. The original painting for this is 4 foot wide by 6 foot tall. So the one on the right is the actual full painting. So I painted an album cover, 4 feet by 6 feet, just because I discovered I could get Arches paper that big in New York. So I bought a few sheets and was like, Nate sent me, like when he asked me, I'd had the first record. It was already out, and it was good, and I liked it. I was like, oh, this is like, kind of, I don't know, like it's got a bit of Danzig in there, but it's kind of like, kind of heavy skate punk, And then when he sent me Darkness Comes Alive, but before I started working on the art, I was like, fuck, this is good. This is like really fucking good. And so I was like, oh, I wanted some. I just came up with this concept. I called the painting Untitled King. It was like referencing a bit of lyric or something. And he wanted the pyramids in the eyes and stuff like that. And I referenced the position of the skull and skeleton. I'll do it quite often, actually, is I'll take elements from old woodcuts and just use like positioning and anatomical. Like I like referencing things. Like I'm not copying it per se. The shield's from an Albrecht Dürer shield as well. I just like, I'm not sure what the word is, but yes, I look at it like, a guitarist writing a song, and they're like, oh, I'm going to have a bit of fucking Iommi in this,
Oh
There's
yeah,
going to be,
I know. I do
yeah,
same thing. I know what you mean. There's a way to do it
yeah,
that's inspired.
yeah. But yeah, so that was actually my first ever big painting. It's all sumi ink, like Japanese sumi ink.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious, man. So you're working on it, and this thing is massive. It's life size. You know what I mean? Like, so are you working on the floor? I mean, it's a sheet of paper. Are you taping it up? Like, what was that kind of like?
I I taped it and stapled it to a piece of MDF.
Okay.
Like I wetted it slightly, made it a little damp, and then stapled it. And then once it was dry, taped it as well, and so it kind of primed it. But that Arches paper is fucking fantastic. It takes
Is
so
it
much abuse.
watercolor paper?
Yeah.
The Arches, yeah. I use I get the pretty massive pieces of hot press Arches. That's what I've been using lately. Is this cold press or hot press? You have any recollection?
This is cold press L'Aquarelle. I'm not sure how to say that word, but I think it works out to be like it's I don't know. It's not £300 paper, but it's the equivalent of, but it's thicker. But it's like it's like £500 or like the thickness or the gauge. It's amazing paper. It's like fucking card, but and it's wonderful, and it's quite daunting actually to do a painting like that. To start, because you're like, oh, there's a fucking bunch of money in front of me. So usually what I do is I take I'll take I don't know, like a really really diluted ink wash and just throw some water and ink on it and just stain it a little bit, then just to break, just to like, okay, because when it's bright white, it just is like, it shows every little smudge and like, oh fuck, I've got ink on my knuckle again, and I've just wiped it across here. Now I'm gonna have to paint the black silhouette of something in that spot because I'm not starting again. So,
I feel your pain, man, or like that exact thought process, because yeah, man, they're not cheap, and I imagine that was like $150 piece of paper at least.
That's actually not that bad. I think it's like, it was at the time it was like $60.
Okay.
And I used to have to. I lived in New York, and there was a paper shop on 3rd Avenue or something, and so I'd go there and buy it, and like take these massive, and they'd roll it so it was like, it'd be like the roll would be that in diameter, and so I'd have this big tube of paper on the subway taking it back. So, but yeah, I've subsequently painted a lot of things on that paper that size, and will continue to do so. I have a couple of things in process right now. I just really like it, and I like paper. One of my favorite artists that's alive today is called Walton Ford. Paints these very interesting narrative kind of Audubon-esque animals, and some of it I think he special orders the paper right directly from the supplier, but some of it's like ridiculous, like 3 meters tall by 5 meters wide. Wow. One sheet of paper.
So do you get this ordered and like shipped to you then, or do you have a shop?
Now I have to order it and ship it, and it comes on a pallet, and you have to buy a minimum of 5 sheets and stuff like that. But and it's all it's because you can get it on a roll, but it's not as thick, and then it never, like, this is so thick it kind of stays very flat and rigid, and it's deckled on all 4 edges as well, because it's mold made, so it's like a natural decal, so it's kind of, it feels like an object.
And then when you got it ready for go ahead.
I've painted a lot with acrylics on it, and a lot of people are like, what is this? It ends up, they think it's just linoleum.
I was just curious, so did you take a photo then for the album, like in terms of like after the painting process to get it ready?
Yeah, this one I didn't really think it through, but I had to. But it opened me into thinking it through. So I then borrowed some studio lights, and I think my friend helped me photograph this one, and I used his studio lights and his camera, and he taught me how to photograph them. And so then I could photograph my own stuff in the future. And then I found a few places that would scan and photograph them. And so kind of from this point onwards, more or less, I started documenting every painting I did. as soon as it was done. As soon as I felt like it was done, I'd use that as a marker point for it being done. Is like, say I've got like a painting I'm working on that I'm like, I think it's finished, and I have time in a week to go drop it off at the people that photograph it. It's finished on the day I drop it off. Like I might work on it right before I get in the car to take it there, even though it's meant to be finished already. But so I've documented everything, and I have like I was looking. I'm going to make a book of my paintings. I think there's something like, I don't know, I have like 350 paintings to go in it. They're a mixture of
That's
everything.
awesome.
So,
very cool, man.
But yeah.
I'm trying to think of anything else on the. I mean, when you were making this, then so you just can make an assumption. So you did like pencil drawing, then you did like a lot of ink washes, or like process wise, how did it work?
I did a pen and ink drawing.
Okay.
Just like microns and pencils and ink drawings, and did lots of sketches for different things and aspects of it. And then I can't remember how I got it on the. I think I just did the classic. How did I do it? I think I just did the classic. Print it out in sections, tape it together. Take a graphite pencil on the back, rub it down, and then flip it over. And do that to transfer it, because I didn't have a projector at the time. And I kind of like that. I like that process of going over those lines multiple times, because you're kind of rethinking how each time you're like, actually, no, that should be like that, and that should be like that. And this album actually had another 2 paintings that went with it. And then Ryan Patterson, he did all the layout, and he used all of my sketches and used them for like the lyric sheet and stuff like that. I made like this super kind of punk, kind of very noisy kind of bit of layout that was really rad for it, and that ended up on some t-shirts and stuff as well. So that stuff I think can be quite. I like these whole package ideas where it's like, if you're lucky enough to get to work on multiple aspects of the packaging, but then having it bleed out into. I mean, it's something I learned from Jake. Really, is having. Just creating. He does it for Converge. Really hard, like really heavily, where you create this big package for the album, where there's you're like, oh, here's your album cover, but I scanned it at this point, so it's also going to work as a t-shirt and blah, etc. Because some album covers look incredible as album covers, but you're like, that can't be a t-shirt or a poster. It's just going to be like, and I feel like these days, bands still need that stuff to make money on the road,
Definitely.
Just so they can put gas in the vehicle. But yeah, I just finished a record actually for. Have you heard of a band called This Will Destroy You?
Yes, I haven't listened to them, but I've heard the name.
Yeah, so they've kind of. It's not. It gets announced in like a week, but they now do some of them do a new thing called U Infinite, and I've just done a complete package for them that's like album cover, front and back, gatefold, both 2 vinyl insert sleeves, and then inside one of the inserts you can open it, and there's like artwork on the inside, and all the info and recording stuff's on the inside, so you have to peek into it. That was actually Robin from Pelagiac's idea. And then I did the vinyl stickers as well. And then I've taken all of that, and that actually started out as, I've got it on my drawing board. That started out as a pen and ink drawing here.
Oh, nice.
So that's kind of the main part of the album cover. And then I actually scanned all this in and then changed colors on things and made like a digital collage. But I did it in black and white, so it could be it's all t-shirt material. So
very cool, man. What one thing? I had a conversation with Merald about like 4 months ago, and there's just something he said that's like stuck with me, and just saying like how he doesn't work for bands, but he works with bands. Like he wants to view it as like a collaborator type of relationship, pretty much right from the onset. I guess it seems like you're kind of in a similar boat where there's like input back and forth in terms of what the end result would look like. I mean, because you do tattooing as like your quote unquote day job, is that the type of project you seek when you're working with bands?
Yeah, I think because of my day job and having the way I work with what I do, I don't have any attachment to what I'm tattooing. If I draw this thing for someone and they're like, that's not really what I'm thinking, I'm like, okay, let's figure it out. Like it's not like I'm not interested in like the authorship of it and like, well, this is what like this is my
Right.
vision or anything like that. And so I'm very accustomed to not having an emotional attachment to what I've drawn in that aspect. Obviously if I've invested like loads of hours, I'll be bummed, but not, it doesn't matter. It'll go somewhere else and get used to something else. So that's taught me a lot in just not being attached to any of that. I don't do any artwork that's literal or figurative. So there's not inherent meanings that kind of come with those genres. So, when I do have some bands that'll be like, oh, we want this at the scene with all these people. I'm like, oh, yeah, it's not happening. You can have that. That scene you're describing, there's a little corner with some sky and a planet. That's what I can do for you.
That's great.
But because because I've got a day job, I'm like, yeah, I'm not the guy for you. Don't worry about it. And then sometimes I'm like, yeah, I don't have time, but here's 5 paintings I have. You can pick one of them and I'll license it to you. But quite often, like the one I just finished with You Infinite, I didn't to take what Merald's doing. And Merald, I actually just spent the weekend with him because I'm doing he's got a lot of tattoos.
You tattooed him, right? Yeah.
Yeah, one of the pictures is of him that you're going to show later.
That's great. Sorry.
So he's getting a bodysuit from me, but he's in a very beautiful way. He's very literal in his approach to creating work from my point of view, and I really like it, and I find him very inspiring. And but I'm not really interested in collaborating with the musicians per se. I'm collaborating with their music, but that's not the thought in my head. I'm like, how can I accompany this beautiful thing they've made? Like, what can I do to what can I make that can hopefully lift it up a bit higher? And I'm also thinking on loads of practical terms. I'm like, okay, this is what this feeling and sounds like on when you're listening to it. But how can I portray that when it's this big on Spotify and someone's going like that? How does it look when it's in a vinyl bin, and how does it look projected behind them when they're playing live? Like, can you capture all those things at once? I think you can try to, but that's where I'm going with some of the work. Trying to that, and then some bands are just like, do whatever you want. And I'm like, I have no idea. So I just think about what's inspiring me when I listen to their music, not really the music, but just in life, and then put some stuff together. And I did that with You Infinite. Like the cover of their record is a bunch of stuff to do with like science and mathematics, with things to do with, like things being endless, and the main cover illustration. And it doesn't, I don't really get that it's connected to the music, but like the main cover of this illustration, this is a close-up of a stone with a hole in it. And I've actually not even told them that that's what the cover is. They're just really interested in it. And there's these stones, they're called hagstones, and they have a mythical meaning that when you look through them, one of the meanings is they're a portal to another world. And I think, and my reasoning for picking that wasn't necessarily their music, it's music in general. And I think music is a portal to another world, because that's why I listen to music. I want to be carried off somewhere else, whether it's I'm out running and I want to listen to something to get me through that, or I'm, going through something emotional, or I'm waking up in the morning and the sun's coming up, and I want, you know, it's like a, yeah.
Well said, man. Shifting to some poster work then. Go ahead and just pick apart. Like, I guess there's like this style of approach that you do as well, where it's like so textured, and I really don't have a good grasp on like how you do this, frankly, because it's so alien to me.
So the ocean poster is is a painting that I high-res scanned, and they wanted a poster. There wasn't much time to do anything, and I wanted it to touch on their album artwork they'd had, and Cave In, and then my interpretation of Cave In and LLNN, and so I and sent them some stuff, and they picked one of the paintings. I was like, well, what can I do with this? And so I pulled the paint. It's quite often what I've been doing lately is taking a painting of mine, and and it's super textural, and like, you know, loads of colors, too many colors to screen print and all of that. And so I then take that painting into Photoshop, and I just select, you know, have the magic wand and select all, and I select everything that's like red and near red and all the little things around it, and I lift that on, and I cut that into a new layer, and I turn it into one shade of flat red. And I do that with every color to break down, maybe there's 30 colors or more, but to break it down into a 6-color image, and it starts becoming much more graphic and blocky. And then I start layering other shapes in between those layers and kind of rebuild my own painting in a way. It's kind of a interesting backwards approach to like pull it apart and approach things from like a non-linear perspective. I like creating layers and textures, and I'm drawn to music that has a lot of layers and a lot of textures. And so I'm kind of, you know, messing with that kind of pulling these things apart. And I did that with both of those ocean posters. The Botch poster, however, is a painting that looks exactly like that, but not as contrasty. So gotcha. The original, it doesn't have not the lettering though. So the for fun, you can add it. You probably can't add it to the deck, but I'll email it to you later, so you see the original. So the original illustration was the Botch. I've loved the Botch since the first time I fucking heard them. They just did it for me before I even knew what they were about. That they weren't into, that they were anti all the macho hardcore stuff. Just the first time I heard them, I was like, "What the fuck is this? This is incredible!" And all my friends hated it. Every one of them couldn't fucking stand it. And so I was like, you know, now on a fucking desert island of like annoying music that no one liked. Even seeing them live, everything. So there's a handful of their songs that have the word eyes in like the first sentence. So I was like, well, I'm going to do eyes. And so I drew all these. I kind of went into a bit. I was like, I want to approach this a bit differently. So I want to kind of create something that has a bit of realism for me, but not really. So I bought like 100 ping pong balls and put them in a box and lit them from different angles and photographed them. And then I used that, and I kind of to make a big massive eyeballs basically with different, you know, in my natural manner, I didn't pay attention to half the shading and shadows. I just kind of made it up, but that was my start anyway. And so that was a black and white illustration on Bristol board, and I scanned that so it could be used for a T-shirt, which they actually didn't end up using, but I used it on a T-shirt for me because I was doing artwork for Botch was a bucket list item. So I was like, well, they didn't use it for a T-shirt, so I'm going to put my Botch artwork on a T-shirt for me. So anyway, so then I painted over it with a couple of layers of Golden make a thing called fluid matte medium, and it's not quite clear, but it's pretty clear. It makes things a little less saturated, but I did 2 coats of that. And then it's basically, it's like an clear acrylic primer. And so then on top of it, I started painting. And I painted all my kind of linear stuff and kind of angular stuff. And I used a lot of masking tape to get all those, precise lines. So I lay out a masking tape grid and I paint in between a flat color, peel it all off. And then I'll then paint another layer of the fluid matte medium. I let that dry. And then I actually sand it back. And so I start removing some of the turquoise, for instance. And then I'll paint some more matte medium, do some more lines, and so on and so forth. And that's how I end up with this broken textural thing. And I got really interested in texture and disturbing the surface of what I'm working on, because I spend so much time in my day when I'm tattooing really protecting the surface of what I'm working on. So I wanted to have something where I can really get into it. So some of my bigger works that are very textural, I literally just, I have an orbital sander and some water and a sponge, and I wet it, the acrylic paint, it's dry, and I wet it down and I sand it, clean it, sand it. And so I start removing a lot of paint and creating all these textures and stuff. And that's why that noise and the texture, that's how I get a lot of it.
It's insane, man. Oh boy. I'm just processing it all. It's so cool. I have a couple of matte mediums. Which one did you say that you typically use, and for what reason?
I just like the products from Golden, but I think Liquitex make a good one as well, or someone like that. But the Golden, I like all of the Golden stuff. And for a while, I was, as a company, they're really good and work as a cooperative. I had a project. I had a really crazy project that was an 11-meter tall painting inside an elevator shaft, and I had to varnish it. So I needed some technical help with the varnish, so I called Golden, and one of the technicians chatted to me for an hour on the phone about how to use the product. And I was like, okay, well, I'm a client for life now, So
that's very cool.
Yeah.
So there's the ultra matte medium, and then there's just the matte medium. You use just the regular? Because it kind of can look a little dull.
Yeah, it always looks dull. Sometimes I water it down. There's fluid matte medium, and there's fluid matte medium and a regular matte medium. I quite like the regular because it'll leave some brush strokes, and if I paint over a color over it and then I sand it back, I'll be left with a negative of the brush strokes. But the Golden make 2 other products. One's an isolation coat, which is an ultra glossy. Exactly, it's a varnish, but it's it isolates all the surface. And so at the very end, I'll use that, and it's super glossy, and it brings all the contrast and everything back. And then I'll paint over that in a satin varnish from Golden as well, an acrylic one. And then it looks really flat, and the colors are rich again, but it looks so flat and smooth, especially if I've been sanding it a lot. Quite often it just looks like a print. And people will be like, well, that print's really good. How did you mount it onto the wood? I'm like, it's just a piece of wood with paint on it. They're like, no, it's not. It's a print. I'm like, no, it's not. It's a painting. I'm like, okay, fine. Believe it. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
And because you're just putting it simply, you're putting this surface through a beading and putting layers and layers and layers. So you're working on wood when you do this process, not a thick watercolor paper or anything?
No, I do it on paper.
Paper, okay.
Sometimes I mount the paper to wood. If I'm working on a massive piece of paper, 4 foot by 6 foot, I'll just work on, I can't put it on, carrying a piece of wood that big is really heavy. So I have to, so I just do it on paper, and it's easier to ship and stuff like that. And then sometimes it's on canvas stretched over wood as well. So I like the nature of disturbing the surface and damaging what would be seen as damage to the canvas is kind of interesting to me.
It's fascinating, man.
I'm just about to start on a big project for next year that's been announced, but the details of what I'm going to do haven't been announced. But I'm collaborating with Steve Von Till at Roadburn on 2 projects. One of them is I've really, this is my new my new favorite term this week is I've pitched myself into a corner. So I've convinced them, and I know what I'm doing and I can do it, but I'm going to make an hour-long film for Steve to play his Harvestman triptych. It'll be projected behind Steve whilst it'll be an hour, but probably, I think maybe he'll play for 45 minutes. And then I'm going to interact with it live and edit it live, hopefully, whilst he plays. So I'm going to make a film.
What does editing it live mean?
Yeah, using some VJ software so that I can layer in kind of animated drawings over the top of this like visual landscape I've created. If you imagine my paintings, especially the very textural ones, like if you imagine close-ups of those being looked at as if you were looking at just the landscape of a planet or something like that. That's kind of the way I approach it. And then we're doing another thing that I'm very grateful Steve's wanted to do this for so long, and we've managed to convince them to let us do it. I'm going to paint 4 big, like 5 foot by 10 foot paintings that are just all like very kind of textural, like my more abstract stuff. And Steve's going to make a soundtrack to them, and we're going to exhibit them at Roadburn. And so they'll be in just an exhibition on their own with a soundtrack from Steve that will be over 7, it'll be like 8 channels, but one of them's a subwoofer. And they'll basically be Brian Eno style, degrading and looping and changing and turning over the course of the weekend.
What do you think? Like 20-year-old you would think about all this cool shit that is coming around the corner, man?
I have no idea. I mean, I think of that quite a bit. I don't think a 20-year-old me would think much differently than 45-year-old me, because really I'm just 20-year-old me inside still.
Yeah.
Because and I do acknowledge, the work I've put in and the trust my peers have given me to do these things. But I was at Arctangent last year with Richie Beckett, and I was with my wife and son, and we were on the side of the stage because Cave In and Converge played that night with Russian Circles, Brutus as well. Then I know them all, so and it's the end of the night. Everyone was done. They were beginning to load out. It was like midnight or something, and I was like, Richie Beckett was there, and I was like, Richie, what the fuck how did we blag our way into this? Like, it could have been anyone else. But here we are, like fucking buddies with our friends. I've got my family. We just sat on the side of the stage and watched Cave In, at a music festival. I was like, what the fuck? How did we end up here? I don't have an answer or really want an answer, but yeah.
That's awesome.
That was 20-year-old me. It's just kind of like, how, why, make sure it's worthwhile, like what I do in the sense,
Absolutely. These intrigued me. I think I pulled them off your Instagram, but they all, obviously go together. Anything memorable with creating them?
Yes. So these I had the idea for making them, and I wanted something that's very graphic and simple. And quite often I get caught up with making them more complex because I've got to do them for something or someone or a project. But my friends, I get to collaborate with some clothing companies over the years, and I've befriended some people in New York that own a kind of like a Japanese style denim brand. And I had some actual denim. They're painted on denim, stretched over board like it was canvas. And I had an exhibition at their store as part of their 20-year kind of celebration. And so I wanted to paint 3 paintings that were very simple and graphic on this fabric of theirs. and I then gifted it. There's a designer and then 2 owners, and so I made them as like exhibition gifts for the 3 of them. But I just wanted to just play with shapes, really, with no inherent course or direction. Quite often when I do these, I have not much of a plan. So the center one, I was like, I just want to do just keep it very simple and stripped back, and it quite often it leads to other things, breaking away from making things too complex or colorful or sanding them or changing them or adding an illustration. So that was kind of it. Just make a very graphic, simple series of 3 things. There was no pressure because they were always intended as gifts.
Like asymmetry in the center of each one of them is really cool. You know what I mean? Because like it's a cool contrast with like the structure around it. Like particularly the one on the far right, like that black pit almost. The fact that it's not exactly uniform there, I think, has a really interesting energy.
Yeah. So the way I make those lines is with masking tape, and I map out a portion of it, and then I do the rest by eye in a method of dividing up the space. And kind of I just go, so I literally start with the cross, and then I go divide it into 8, and then it's 16, and then it's etc. And so it just keeps going up, and with no real plan, and that is what makes it kind of geometrically correct. But because I've not measured all the spacing out, it goes a little off, and you get the but then it kind of pushes everything else. And that's why, because I kind of want them to feel, I'm interested in this idea of light and space represented in the paintings, but I also like mixed with my interest in music, which is vibration. So it's like trying to represent a bit of vibration or something.
Very cool. Just a couple of things that you've done with like Converge. I thought really cool.
So thank you. So the left one was for the Jane Live series. So I kind of was like, okay, I was like, fuck, what do I do for this? So, I wanted to, and I was like, well, at the time, and I always make these geometric patterns in my tattoos a lot. I use them as, rather than the main structure, as like textural infills. I was like, okay, well, what's going on in that? Oh yeah, I remember. And so I drew that. So I just put a pattern inside the traditional Jane image, and drew it in pen and ink, and then I painted some grey. It's not really grey. It's a different. There's a lot of inks made out of dyes on that piece, and then I bleached, and then the stuff that's lighter is because I bleached it.
Okay.
And then I put some yellow and black, and then really made a mess of it. And Jake did a whole series of Jane screen prints mounted to hardboard with that he varnished. He added more color and splatter and texture, and I have one of them. And I was kind of referencing some of those things. And so I kind of wanted to like emulate the original Jane painting, but kind of put a bit of me into it.
Awesome,
redesigning the whole thing.
Kind of looks like wet on wet watercolor technique to me, like in terms of all the texture around the actual Jane Doe.
Yeah, there's a bit of that quite often. Quite often, I think that one is the black is charcoal powder mixed with matte medium into like it's not quite. It's like a heavy cream almost, and then I paint it in different areas on a piece of clear plexi, and then I kind of monoprint the texture. Then and then I wet the paper, lay it on there, and then peel it off, and it kind of fractals a bit and smudges and makes a mess. But it also has some patterning to it. But yeah, and I get to control where it goes because I kind of monoprinted it. But because it's wet, it bleeds out as well.
One thing I don't know how to ask this. It's like, because it's fundamental to how your brain works, but like it's like you're always experimenting with how these different tools interact with one another. So like, are you had you already done that with like the graphite powder and the matte medium, or are you like, I have enough experience that
Yeah.
I'm just going to test it? Like,
No, I've
I don't
been
know.
doing it a lot. There was
Yeah.
I did it for a whole series of paintings, and uh, I look I look at different ways to make quick abstract textures because I like making studies and kind of doing daily studies as they like, like, but just textual, just and playing with that to kind of come up with different things and to try and achieve like a different look that's somewhat unique but is grounded within some material sensibility, so it doesn't look like, because I don't want it to look like it's digital. I want it to
Right.
feel textural and real and visceral, but I want it to give me the feeling of a piece of digital art of some sort of space or some sort of ephemeral kind of thing like that.
So you're doing like these daily experiments, taking note of them, and then you know when to apply them to your final pieces. It's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
I mean, not every day. I'll just go through periods where I'm like, oh, okay, I think the best run I ever had was I did it for like nearly 4 months, where I did one a day.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then I won't do it for a while, and then I'll have a project come up where I have to do something. I think I had to do it for Hex Vessel actually. I did the most recent Hex Vessel album. I did a bunch of the interior stuff in the booklet and the CD, and so I painted a bunch of kind of textural like I did, like 20 circular kind of, for lack of a better word, messy textural things that were like spherical, almost planetary bodies. And then I picked my 5 favorite ones and did white pen and ink drawings on top of them. And so, and then the others all sit around and I'll do some more to them, or, and they all just give me ideas for other things. And I try to treat it like like a practice. And I'm not as structured as you made it sound, where quite often I'll I'll discover these techniques, and then like 3 years later, I'm just doing something else, and I don't own the original anymore. I forgot how I even got to that point, and I'll see a picture of it and be like, oh, how did I do that? Oh, I remember that. That was pretty cool. Oh, I should do that again. That's why I want to make a book of my work. I mean, I'd like to sell it to help me buy materials to make more work, but mostly so I can look at it and be like, oh, okay, now that was that piece, and I did that for that. Okay, now I need to remember that. So
That's cool, man.
maybe I have a bit of ADHD, maybe not. I'm quite a rapid thinker, thinking of stuff a lot, and like I'm very interested in process and kind of creating, like coming up with like, well, I'm going to do this with this and this and this, and see what that order of things is. Kind of like cooking almost.
I
See what I
think
can
you have
come up
a
with.
lot of natural curiosity, and you like to experiment. That's what I'm gathering. And then, I mean, you seem pretty methodical though at the same time, just from outside observation. But like, shit, what was I about to say? I think you used a word that I thought was interesting. You said I had to do this like in a certain way. Is that had to because your compulsion to what you wanted it to look like made you have to do it, or like the clients demanded what you wanted? I guess my point is like sometimes I feel like I set these things out and then it's like the later me has to then fulfill them. You know what I mean? I don't know if that's
Yeah,
too
no,
abstract, but is it kind of like that in this case?
yeah. It's mostly just me. It's me coming up with a method, going, oh, I'm going to do this, then this, then this, and I need to follow that through to see where that ends up. Because I also don't want to make anything that's I want it to feel like it's in line with my work, but I don't mind repeating myself, but I also want the work to evolve.
Right.
So yeah, and then so like the one on the right, the poster for the Converge Blood Moon show in Boston, that was an idea I'd had for a painting for ages that I'd never painted, and then that opportunity came up and was like, oh, that's perfect because there's snakes all over that record. It's a perfect, and there's I can't remember the title, but there's on the Blood Moon record there's a song about a snake or something. Well, I can't remember, but so I wanted this just writhing mass of snakes that just didn't have any heads or anything like that, and it's a bit tattooy, the eyes, the simplicity, it's got some like that, and I wanted it to feel a little, I like sometimes when I'm illustrating stuff like that where the drawing's a bit naive and a bit wrong, but but there's enough of it that it's intentional. And then I just washed over, it was a black and white pen and ink drawing and painting, and then I just went over and over and over it with sumi wash until it became this dense grey thing.
And then the underside of the snake, is that a pretty solid, like just sumi, like not diluted with water at all?
No, that's Dr. P.H. Martin's matte black. I can't remember the name of it. The Dr. P.H. Martin's makes a matte black ink.
Okay.
It's fucking brilliant. It's super black.
Does the sumi ink, does that often kind of have that brown tint when you start diluting it? But then like India ink is maybe a little more gray, or what is it, the difference?
No, the sumi ink's got a really bluey, milky tone, but I'm leaving out a key secret here. You see how the Converge one on the left has that brown sepia tone?
Yeah.
In the paper up the top that's not been messed with. That's there's a brand of ink called walnut ink that is made to look like the ink that used to be made from walnuts back in Leonardo da Vinci's time. I think he's in, the guy that makes it's in Boston or something. You can buy it quite easily. But most brown and sepia inks that are made by the major ink companies, as you wash them out, they split into the red and green hues. And so you don't get, this is more like an acrylic. It's more like it's a brown pigment in ink that's also waterproof. So I can do a very light wash, and it's quite granular. So as it's drying, if I flick water onto it that maybe has a touch of salt or a bit of alcohol in it, it will make it split and get a bit kind of textural and messy. And so, but it's very subtle, and so, or it'll pool in a little area and get a bit darker. And so it gives me this like dirty old paper look.
Very cool, man. Yeah, I have some of that walnut ink, but I haven't had a use for it yet. But yeah, you got my head spinning on like how to spice up some of my stuff with just some interesting textures.
Yeah, I mean, and I think a fun way to do it is sometimes like, and so some of these inks, and you have to experiment, and I haven't done it in a while, so I can't remember. So some of these inks, so like if I take a piece of Arches and I'll wet it like in the sink. So, obviously it's not a big sink, so it's not a big piece of paper, but I soak it completely, so it's soaked all the way through. And then you have to make sure you put it on something that's not going to stick itself to, like a wire rack or a piece of glass or something. Shake some water off, put it on there, and then I'll let it dry for a little bit, but it's still kind of damp and wet, and then I'll wash it with the walnut ink that's really diluted, maybe flick some darker bits on there. Then I'll flick a bit of very watered down sumi, and the sumi and the friction in the fluids, and so they'll not quite go together. And then some of the black inks, like Higgins, for instance, has a lot of surface friction against the other pigments, and so you'll get a bit of kind of textural stuff, and it'll get a bit granular in places and stuff like that. And I like all those things, and so I'll sit there and make 10 sheets of paper like that, and then be like, oh, this one's really good, I'm going to draw this on there. And sometimes it'll inform the drawing, but sometimes I'm just like, I'm like trying to make pieces of paper that I found in an old suitcase.
Does it feel warped at all when you're working on it? Like, is it have some waves and shit?
Because I use the really thick stuff, the 300 pound. generally I buy the big sheets of like 22 by 30, 300-pound paper, and then Deck will tear that down into smaller amounts. If you dampen it a little bit, it will tear much easier, I think. It's been a minute, but yeah. And so I'll have these small pieces of paper that are thick like card, so they won't warp at all.
Yeah, I still seem to have very slight warping with the 300-pound, but like if I'm using it for like reproduction purposes, you can't tell at all. Like when I scan it.
Yeah, I don't even really mind too much if it's warped.
Yeah,
you know, if I paint, if it's got a deckled edge and I paint up and over the edge, then to me it's an object. And if you're framing it, you float it, and so the warping is fine. But if you're leaving a white border, taping it off, and it's warped, and you've got to mount it and mat it, then that is going to show up and be weird, unless you take it to a place. Have you ever got the iron out?
No.
Because the paper's made out of cotton, so you can just iron it flat. You obviously be careful of your drawing. So,
I mean, I'll do the trick where you wet the back, then you put a bunch of weight on it, and that works really well. I don't. Yeah, I think part of it's just me being anal about it.
I quite often just use a steam iron, and but yeah, I've done it enough to not worry too much about the art. But sometimes it'll get a bit fucked up, but I'm kind of okay with it.
Nice.
But I've got like on the subject of like, I haven't even posted this one yet. So I recently did a T-shirt for. I ticked off another bucket list thing, and I should mention the Botch poster. I did a bandana for them as well, which I thought was funny. But I did that because I asked them. I just reached out because I had a little bit of email communication with Dave Knudsen about doing some Minus the Bear art that never happened. And during COVID, I don't know, there was a post on Instagram or something. So I ended up sending him a message and just seeing how he was doing. And we started chatting again. And then Botch was happening again. And I was like, dude, if you're doing a New York show, can I do the poster? And so and then recently I had an exchange with Sean Ingram, who I got to know because he handled all the Neurosis Fires and Within Fires merch for when that came out. So I had to liaise with him about getting all the merch together for that. And so we send messages back and forth on Instagram here and there. And so when Coalesce were like kind of lifting their head up again, I was like, dude, I'd love to do some work for Coalesce. And he's like, oh, I thought I didn't think that'd be a thing you'd be into. I was like, oh no, for sure. He's like, well, just do whatever you want. And so I did, which was kind of a broad thing. And I painted something that you probably wouldn't think was a T-shirt. So this was what I painted for Coalesce.
Here, hold on a second. I'm going to blow you up a bit. Well, that's cool, dude. I love how varied it is.
Yeah, so it's like there's pen and ink, and then acrylic, layers of acrylic, all sorts of shit.
That's so cool, man. Yeah.
And they changed the colors and dropped the black and the yellow out and turned it into like a red, white, and blue print on a black T-shirt.
I got another random question. Well, a lot of the clients you've talked about, you've been friends with them, so there's a level of trust. But like, because your work is more abstract and you're like, the process yields the art, you're not doing figurative stuff. How do you present ideas? Because a sketch sometimes wouldn't really do it justice. Like, what does that look like?
Sometimes I don't.
Yeah. That's what I would imagine.
Sometimes I'm just like, can we have a phone call? I'm going to kind of describe it to you. And then I'll just try and get it done before the deadline. So you have a chance to say, no, can we have something else? But, because I have a day job, it doesn't always work like that. Like the U Infinite thing, like the week I was meant to hand it in, I was like, this is the album cover. And they were like, great, we love it. I was like, thank fuck for that. But they also didn't give me any direction. So, but that's, I don't have a physical copy of that because it's a digital collage based off of my own. It's like it's all pen and ink drawings I've done and mixed with a textural piece that I've done that's kind of has like a it feels like stone or concrete or something, mixed with when I was in New York actually on a work trip, and I was finishing the illustrations whilst I was in New York on a tattoo work trip, and I was on the subway one day, and I was like, oh, the laminate on the side of the subway car's got this microscopic grid pattern. I was like, that's really cool. Maybe I'll use that in the layout. And so I took a picture on my phone and then made it high res and then flipped it into hard black and white, and then kind of layered it into one of my paintings. So yeah, and they said yes. And then the gatefold of that record is a very, very textural painting that my Lightroom, I store a lot of the photographs of my paintings in Adobe Lightroom, and I was exporting it, this image from Lightroom, and the Lightroom crashed whilst doing it and got some lines of the code wrong. And so it has it's like a section of painting and then stretched pixels and then painting and then stretched pixels. And it's all very random and almost looks like a sequence of radio signal, but on my out of my painting. But I don't know, it's weird. It looks like I think you could do it quite easily digitally, but I liked how random it was. And I was like, are you going to do a gatefold? They were like, yeah. I was like, what do you think of this for the gatefold? They were like, oh, that's perfect. I was like, okay, great. Easy. I think it fits really well, and I'm really, really proud of it and how it came together. And I can't wait to have the physical thing in my hands. But yeah, and I'm going to try and, this is my job this week, is to try and animate some of those still paintings into kind of layered moving things so that when they announce it, they can have a bit of a art trailer.
Well, it's like, maybe it sounds like practice for Roadburn too, what you were talking about.
Yeah. So I've done it before. So I just finished I didn't do any layout, but I just did an album cover to my friend Sandy. Him and his wife have a band called Skloss, which is like it could fit into, I call it space, like kind of droney space gaze. It could fit into the realm of shoegaze, but it's more on the spectrum of like ISIS heavy, So it's very, very heavy, but it's just guitar and drums, husband and wife band. It's super cool. But they performed inside a concrete culvert earlier in the year, which is like they're like, I guess they lay them in the ground for major flood sewers or something. And there's two of them that are just in this field put together. They played inside that, and I made a 50-minute visual kind of art piece that got projected onto the ceiling of that. And so I've done this stuff before. It was very funny when I did that. I showed it to my mum, and she was like, she's an artist as well. She was like, that's amazing. She's like, when you were at college, I always thought you were going to be a filmmaker. I was like, you're telling me that now, 25 years later? I was like, what? Like, you could. I mean, I'm happy for the path I've been on, but okay, fine. But yeah,
could have used some encouragement then, huh?
Yeah, I mean, she gave me encouragement in anything I wanted to do. So the painting that's up now, that's not a painting. It was a painting, but what you're seeing is a screen print. I have this wonderful relationship with Sarah and Jody from Night Swim, and I send them these fucking crazy paintings of mine. That painting is on a round piece of paper that was used as a mask by me and Jake at Roadburn for putting a circular halo on something, and it got covered in so much paint. And then I put some matte median on it and sanded it back and added some more paint, sanded it back, and then added the geometric rays over the top. And I really liked it, and was like, they wanted to do a print, so I sent it to them, and they separated that into 7 or 8 color print, and the screen printed it. They had I only gave them a flat file. So,
dang, man, that's not easy.
No, they're exceptionally skilled and talented, and a real wonderful company, actually.
How did you cut your paper in a circle?
With a knife.
God, seems hard.
I drew. I think I used like a trash can and placed it on the paper and drew a circle around it, and then used a scalpel so that we could place that on some paper and spray paint over the top of it so that you'd have a, because when we did the project at Roadburn, Jake and I before, usually it would be that we'd do two editions of prints that would be around 70 prints in each edition, and we'd design the artwork prior, and it would be a single or two color print, and then I'd usually start the paper at home, but we'd then hand color, so technically like 140 to 150 sheets of paper over the course of the weekend, and then they'd start printing them Saturday night to sell them Sunday afternoon. So the people at the festival could come, as they'd start showing up on Thursday, they'd just see us painting these pieces of paper, and then they'd come back. And for a lot of these people, they get to see Jake working and get to chat to him, and it's kind of a nice way for him, I think, to be able to talk to fans of his work. But he's busy, so he's got his hands in it, so he's not stuck just monologuing about what he's doing. He's just like having a quick chat and then getting to do it. Monologuing is an unfair word. He's not going to. I should say, so he doesn't feel like he's monologuing. But and then so we just create all this stuff, and people, they come by and they've seen one piece of paper like travel through this process and then have the print on it at the end, and they're like, okay, I'm going to get that piece at the end. So it's quite fun, I think.
That's awesome, man. So moving on to some tattoo work. But yeah, are these like relatively recent like pieces? I mean, obviously there's a ton of work here.
Yeah. So, the piece on the left is ongoing. It looks a little strange there because his hips are open, but it's going to be a bodysuit. So we're doing everything. Yeah, he had an existing sleeve on the right arm that we're actually going over the top of as well. So, and we started his back last time I was there. But I think the only thing that we're not touching is the Death Star on his chest. Which I really like leaving behind. As that's no moon, etc. But it's a interesting, ornamental, transformative process. A lot of the time, I'm again thinking about layers and textures, but adhering to the very graphic nature of tattooing and creating these bold, striking images that stand out and stand the test of time, and will look like something in 40, 50 years, or look like they do now in 40, 50 years, but from afar have an impact. But when you get up close, it's just more and more. And I do some simple stuff as well, but with the large work like this, there's a term that interests me called horror vacui, and Aristotle translated it as my favorite translation, which is nature abhors a vacuum. And I just like this idea of like just every bit of space is filled, even if it's negative open space, but you fill everything with, it's like it's everywhere, all encompassing. And I think the customers, I don't know, to me, there is a sense, some of these, it's a lot, and it could have a sense of being overwhelming and like intense, but the repetition and all the stuff, I don't know, to me it's quite calming. But yeah,
absolutely.
And then the one on the right, that was taken like the day we finished it. Actually, it's been quite a long process, but that's got a whole load of stuff in it. It's like a planetary celestial kind of nod to like early Renaissance art when they were trying to figure out the cosmos and the heavens and like what it meant to be alive, mixed with like things like that. And the top triangle on his back has a whale eye inside a circle, because he liked some flash I'd done of a whale. And I don't know, it was just one of the jumping off points. You can't see it right now because it's when they're both of these have elements that are fresh in them from the day they were photographed, and when they're fresh, they don't photograph that great, and they're kind of a bit dark. darker and less contrasty than when they're healed. So there is a big wale on the guy's right hip, and on the second picture, and so I think I've been indirectly, permanently influenced with growing up watching loads of science fiction, and I think the Star Trek film, I think it's Voyage Home, where they travel back in time and stick the whales in a Klingon ship. I'm kind of exposing my full nerd right now, but that just always like the idea of that we basically have dinosaurs still swimming in the ocean really fascinates me, and and the way they communicate, and who knows, they're like these celestial beings that we fucking have nearly killed off. So so that's my day job. Go to the next one. So on the picture on the left is Merald van Hartesen. I can't do the Dutch rolling of the R's. But so that was taken on Saturday. We finished his back that day, and then the guy on the right, it's all healed and finished. Both of the pieces go down to the back of the knees, but the guy on the right was actually working at my shop that day, so I got a picture of the two together. And because you don't normally get two people in the same room that have so much work from oneself, and so Merald, he had a very specific concept. Everything that's there was discussed, worked out, like kind of really kind of triangulated and planned. The guy on the right, he emailed me and said he wanted his back done. He asked how long my wait was, and there was quite a bit of a wait, but I had a cancellation that was open in 4 days. I was like, but you can start in 4 days if you want. He's like, perfect, I want to start. I was like, okay, but what would you like? Because we hadn't even discussed that. And he's like, oh, I just like your skulls, your ravens, and your eyes. And so I drew up this thing that's like, you can't see it there, but I mean, you can kind of see it, but it's like it's a massive skull, but it warps and it has like a linear shift halfway across the lower back as it goes onto the butt, and the bird on the shoulders is actually based on an illustration I did for a Miyaka t-shirt, and it's a raven that had loads of eyes and kind of lines of sight coming out of the eyes and the wings, and so I made it in so it's got that on the top, because I was playing with the iconography of each, but I was also, you can't really see it in the small picture there, but the skull has a very flat, smooth texture with bold, calligraphied lines, whereas the bird is all done with pointillism shading and much finer lines. And so half the time I'm actually looking at the subject matter, but I'm thinking about the visual language of the textures and the composition. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I could do this because I can use that, and then that, and put that with that, and
So they both traveled to. This was a new shop opening day, or like right around then?
Yeah, because we had like a party weekend. So we had on the Friday we had a regular day of work, and then at night that gentleman I mentioned earlier, Matthew, he does this project called Greet. He played right behind me actually. He sang with a harmonium, and we had like in our little shop we had like, I think there's about 50-60 people.
Oh wow!
But a constant turnover of people as well. So I put all the furniture in the basement, because we have a full basement underneath here as well.
Nice.
So with my friends and my family, I remodeled the entire space. So it's got everything new: lights, electric, floors, walls, paint. The whole thing's completely new, and the way I kind of wanted to make a space to work in, and hopefully others will enjoy working in it. So, and then on the weekend we did a weekend of flash tattooing. So I had a bunch of friends come visit and guest with me, and do flash. And I kind of wanted to kick it off and start it so that because I want to keep doing events like that, and I'm hoping, like for for instance, next time Cave-In tour, I've already asked Steve this. I'm like, can you please play Brighton, and then please you and Adam are going to play it in the back, and hopefully, and hopefully it can work in a way where they're my friends, and they get tattooed by me already, so I'll trade tattoos for a performance, and then the show can be for free. So it's an attainable thing for people, and they can and then their fans can get stuff signed afterwards. Next time Baroness come through, hopefully John and Gina will play in the back and do that kind of thing. And I'll do some folk stuff as well, but I don't want to have anything heavy in here. But it's kind of fun to have these musicians show off another side of themselves. And the main space will double as a gallery. So when John comes through, hopefully he'll have an exhibition too. So, because I've been tattooing John I've done a lot of work on John. So after Baroness had their bus crash, John got tattooed for like nearly a year because he couldn't go on the road. So we did most of his torso and his sleeves.
And were you tattooing in the US at that time then?
Yeah, I was tattooing.
Pretty convenient for him.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because they lived in Philadelphia at the time. And funnily, I've not actually ever done any work for Baroness.
Not yet.
We've talked about it, but yeah.
I think this is the last one then.
This is the last one. So I've not published a finished picture of this online yet, because I've been enjoying keeping it to myself. Because I made a little short film. My friend made a little short film about the last session finishing it, because it's very different to a lot of the large tattoos I've done. I've done some small stuff that's got a bit of this, but this is basically my paintings as a tattoo, but black and white. And it was his idea. He was like, can you do one of your paintings as a tattoo? I was like, I don't think so. And he just asked a couple of times. I was like, okay, let me try a drawing. And I did. And I was like, I think this could work. What do you think? And he's like, I like it. And I was like, okay. I mean, there's a big part of I don't want it to sound blasé, because I am respecting how permanent this is, the investment of time, energy, blood, the skin, all of that. But there is I don't know, I think with any art, if it's to be exciting, there has to be a gamble. Maybe there doesn't have to be, but for me, there has to be. The best reference, I was talking with a friend recently. I watch a lot of films, whether they're Hollywood or independent, all sorts. But I was talking to a friend who's a tattooer, about like trying to reference what it's like to make art and then tattoo it on people on a big scale, and what that really feels like. And closest I can come in pop culture is, have you seen the first Deadpool movie?
Yeah.
So at the beginning of the movie, he's sitting on the bridge doing a kid's drawing of the guy he wants to kill, right? So
yeah.
Pretend there's no gratuitous violence in my reference here. So he's doing a kid's drawing, and in my head, most of my drawings are just fucking kids' drawings, right? I'm just a kid doodling skulls in his fucking workbook at school. So he's doing a kid's drawing, and then when he sees his target coming, he stands up and just says, okay, maximum effort, and then jumps off a bridge into moving traffic. And that's how tattooing generally feels for me, is just doing a kid's drawing, taking a massive breath, jumping off a bridge, or stepping out into moving traffic and just giving it my best effort.
And you've done it hundreds and hundreds of times now then.
Yeah. And it's not scary, like crippling scary, like riding a roller coaster or, anything serious. But there is like there's an I outlined a guy's back piece today. We started a massive project for him, and there's a massive commitment. I know I can do it, but I don't know that he can do it, or didn't know that he could do it. He could. It's just a big the odds are good, but there is a roll of the dice.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. And not that the tattoo's ever going to be bad. It's just the whole, the situation, and maybe there isn't, maybe it's not a gamble. Maybe that's just what I tell myself to keep myself on my toes, make myself not take it for granted and work really hard to make it the best it can be. Because I've got this thing in the back of my head that thinks that I could fuck it up. So I need to make sure that I don't,
I mean, I think that's a smart thing with something as permanent, painful like you were talking about earlier. As we kind of start to wrap up, I mean, I'm definitely feeling inspired. And I imagine anybody watching along there's been multiple things that's probably grabbed your attention and, inspiration. But I guess would be maybe like one thought or piece of advice you would leave any artists who are watching?
I would say, so the advice I try to give anyone that when they ever do ask for a bit of advice is only compare yourself to the work you've previously done. Don't worry about what other people are doing. Just make sure what you've done has moved forward, even if you're still doing the same stuff. Just compare to yourself, and keep a record of your work so that you can look back and be like, when you're looking at what fucking the new hot shit guy's done, and you're like, fuck, and then and you feel inadequate, look at what you did a year ago or 5 years ago and be like, oh fuck, look at how far I've come, look what I learned and all that. That's the best thing. I learned a long time ago, keeping pictures of my tattooing and pulling a shoebox out and going, oh fucking hell, like look how much I've progressed, my drawing skills and all of that. And then the main one I like to say, and this isn't for everyone, and some people would disagree with this, and maybe this is a symptom of my generation, which I'm 45, so I don't even know what generation that is, but
X.
Of like being like I'm a workaholic, but I'm proud of it, but maybe that's to my detriment and to my fault, but I believe if you're going to make art, and I can't, I'm taking this from someone and I can't remember who. It was a commencement speech, and I can't remember who it was. But if you're going to do a creative thing, do it like it's as important as breathing. Like making art is as important as oxygen. So you just got to do it all the time. And that doesn't mean you've got to do it 20 hours a day. If all you can manage is half an hour, then just do half an hour. So that's why those daily abstract textural practice thing I did, it was in a period where I could barely scrape aside 10 minutes a day to make art. So I spent an afternoon setting up a station. So in the morning, with my coffee, I'd go out and do something for 10 minutes and then walk away. And then I'd get back at night and I'd be like, oh, cool. And get ready for the next one in the morning. And then, and it didn't feel like much, but at the end of 2 months, I had this stack of paper. And there was 3 in there that were fucking really good. And the rest are like, oh, well. And now Murad's drawing weird shit all over all of them.
Nice.
But that's it. But that's it for a project we're doing together. So yeah,
I'm excited to see that. So, you got 2 very different styles, kind of like meeting together. That'd be very neat to see.
Yeah, my favorite thing that Murad said to me this weekend, because every time I see him, I'm like, why do you draw on mat board, dude? It's fucking the worst thing ever to draw on. It just breaks apart. It's not a surface. It's just a presentation. He's like, but it's challenging and it keeps me on my toes and it's so difficult. It challenges me so much. I'm like, yes, but artists make black paper. Maybe it would be really. But I love that he loves that it's difficult.
Yeah. Well, you guys both have an intensity when it approaches your work that I know for me, it like you're saying, like, don't compare yourself to others in terms of what you're producing. But I do think when you hear or interact with other artists that are doing good habits and things that can inspire you, take that. So I'm leaving this conversation with that. I really appreciate it, Thomas. Anybody who's watching, please support Thomas. He sounds like he has a book coming eventually, but he has prints available in Death Wish store. Anything else that you have available for sale that you could think about?
So my two main web stores are on Death Wish. I have T-shirts and prints and stuff, and then there's Night Swim, which is a woman-owned screen print company, and that's what they do. All my screen printing. The quality is phenomenal, and I mean, like, yeah, not to plug it away, but there'll be like a 24-inch by 24-inch, like 8-color screen print that's $60. Yeah. So, and the quality is exceptional. So, and they're great to deal with and everything. And everything on Death Wish is fantastic. But yeah, I'm very proud to work with both of them.
Awesome, man. Well, for everybody watching, thank you again. See you next week. Thomas.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you for anyone that's listened to this all the way through to the end. And thank you to everyone that has and continues to support the pictures that I like to make.
Sounds good. All right. See you guys.